I didn't tell anyone this, not even the people who think they know me best. But the day my boss fired me, it didn't feel like a firing. It felt like someone quietly closing a door behind you and pretending it was your idea to leave. And the worst part, I didn't argue. I just stood there, hearing the sentence that ended 3 years of my life delivered like he was asking me to pass the salt. It started the morning after I'd pulled a 14-hour shift to finish a project he had promised would make us look good to corporate. Us. He loved it a Slovo, as if his name wasn't the only one on every email, every meeting, every report that crossed the director's desk. I was just the guy who did the work, the guy who handled things, the guy who got called on weekends because I understood the system better. The kind of employee bosses pretend they value until they don't. That day, I walked into his office with a folder full of updates, actual progress, not excuses, and he didn't even look up from his phone. He just kept scrolling, the corner of his lip lifting like he was reading a joke someone sent him. "Morning," I said. He sighed, long and slow, finally putting the phone down. "Don't start with the pleasantries, Mark. I'm having a day." He always was. At least that's how he behaved, like the world existed to inconvenience him. I set the folder on his desk. "The figures from yesterday. The new report?" He waved a hand. "Don't need it." "Okay, but the deadline." I said I don't need it. He leaned back. "Actually?" He tilted his head, looked at me like he was trying to remember where he'd seen me before. "I don't need you either," I laughed. A small, awkward sound. I genuinely thought he was joking. He loved those weird, uncomfortable jokes, the kind that didn't land but demanded a chuckle. "You're serious?" I asked. He shrugged. "No termination papers needed. Just go away. Just go away." Like I was a fly he didn't want to swat because it would leave a stain. For a second I actually waited for the punchline. Something like, "Relax, Mark, you look like your soul just left your body." But he didn't smile. He didn't blink. He just turned to his monitor and opened a spreadsheet that I recognized, because I was the one who built it from scratch. I looked at the walls, certificates he didn't earn, achievements he took credit for, plaques he'd hung crooked but refused to let anyone touch. He once told me, "People should see them imperfect. Shows I'm too busy to care." No, it showed he didn't care because he didn't do the work. I took a breath, the kind that feels like you're swallowing nails. "Do you want a handover? Files? Access keys?" He didn't even look at me. "Nope. It can handle the rest. You're good. Doors behind you." That was it. 3 years, reduced to a hand flick. I picked up my jacket. My hands were numb. It wasn't anger. That came later. This was something else. Like watching your body move without you. Like I'd rehearsed this scene without knowing it. As I walked out, a few coworkers looked up from their desks. 2 gave sympathetic half-smiles, the kind people give when they sense something happened, but don't want to be involved. 1 pretended not to see me at all, and 1, Emma mouthed, "What happened?" I shook my head. She looked genuinely upset, but I didn't stop to explain. I stepped into the hallway, feeling the air change, colder, quieter, sharper. I felt the pressure behind my eyes, that sting you get when your pride gets hit harder than your body ever has. I didn't cry. I didn't yell. I didn't slam a door. I just walked. In the lobby, I paused and realized something strange. I didn't have anything to pack. Everything I'd built, every system, shortcut, template, process, lived on the servers he'd take credit for tomorrow. I only had a half-dead plant at my desk and a pair of headphones missing 1 ear cushion. I left both. Outside, the sun felt too bright, the street too loud. I sat on the driver's seat, gripping the steering wheel until my knuckles went white. There were 100 things I could have said to him. All the late hours, the fixes I made that saved him from looking like an idiot, the deals I salvaged that he bragged about. But the truth is, none of it would have mattered. He didn't fire me because I was bad. He fired me because I made him look better than he was, and guys like him can't stand that kind of mirror. I stared at the building for a long minute, replaying his words. No termination papers. Just go away. Like he was doing me a favor. I started the engine. My brain was foggy, but something inside me, something quiet, small, stubborn, whispered, remember this. Every second of it. Because something about this isn't finished. And I didn't know it yet. But when I left that building, someone else was still inside. Someone who had heard the entire exchange. Someone who wasn't supposed to be there. When I got home that day, I didn't sit down. I didn't turn on the TV. I didn't even take off my shoes. I just stood in the hallway, staring at the wall, like it might suddenly explain why a man could throw away 3 years of someone else's work without blinking. It wasn't even the firing. That part, strangely, felt clean. It was the carelessness, the ease, the way he'd dismissed me like he was brushing crumbs off his shirt. I kept replaying his face, that bored, half-annoyed look, as if my entire existence was a minor inconvenience he finally had the energy to deal with. Maybe that's what stung the most. I'd been useful until the moment I wasn't entertaining anymore. Useful, not valued. Well, later that evening, my phone buzzed, a number I didn't recognize. I almost ignored it, but something tugged at me. Maybe instinct, maybe spite. I answered. "Mark?" The voice was steady, older. "Yes." "This is Russell Hale." I froze. That name wasn't just familiar. It sat above my boss's boss, above the entire building. Russell wasn't someone low-level employees met. He was the guy from the newsletters, the quarterly addresses, the framed portrait in reception. "I hope I'm not calling at a bad time," he said. "No, not at all," I replied, trying to sound like a functional human being and not a man who had spent the past hour staring at his refrigerator door, because opening it felt like too much effort. "I heard what happened today." My heart tripped over itself. "You heard?" There was a pause, deliberate, heavy, the kind that tells you the next sentence is a loaded one. "Yes," he said. "I was in the corridor outside your boss's office this morning. He didn't see me, but I heard everything." I sat down slowly, like my body was figuring out gravity for the first time. He continued, "I'd like to meet with you tomorrow. In person." A dozen thoughts collided in my head. Was this good? Bad? A formality? Damage control? Was I about to be told that everything was just a misunderstanding? Or, worse, was this all leading to some friendly corporate version of, "You're still fired, but nicely this time"? "Of course," I said. "Any time works." "Good," he replied. "Let's say 9. And Mark?" "Yes?" "That wasn't a firing I heard today. That was something else, something we need to address." That was just the beginning. I barely slept. Not because of nerves, because of anger. The kind of anger that doesn't roar but simmers, slow and controlled, like a pot kept just under boiling. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw my boss's smirk, his dismissive hand wave, the way he'd said, "Doors behind you," like I was lucky he hadn't thrown me out bodily. Morning came too soon. Coffee tasted like paper. My shirt felt too tight. I arrived 10 minutes early for the meeting. The receptionist's eyes widened when she saw me, not rudely, but with that same, "Why are you here?" surprise people get when they see a teacher outside of school or a coworker in gym clothes. "Mr. Hale is expecting you," she said quickly. I rode the elevator to the top floor, the one with the frosted glass walls and the good carpet, not the industrial stuff with coffee stains. I'd only been up here twice, once during onboarding, once when they briefly pretended to care about employee feedback. Russell's office was large, but strangely uncluttered. A few framed photos, one plant, a desk that looked like only real work ever touched it. He gestured to the seat across from him. "Glad you came." "I'm still a little confused," I admitted. "You shouldn't be." He folded his hands. "Your boss crossed several lines yesterday. Professional, ethical, legal. I've been monitoring that department for months. Yesterday simply confirmed what we suspected." The anger inside me sharpened. I didn't expect any of this. I thought I'd just walk away and that would be the end. It won't be, he said. Not for him. I swallowed. What about me? He looked at me with an expression I hadn't seen from anyone in management before, genuine consideration. That depends on what you want. A strange relief washed over me, not the kind that fixes everything, but the kind that lets you finally exhale after holding your breath too long. But under it, something heavier stirred, something that had been quiet until now. I realized I'd spent years being the guy who held everything together, who covered mistakes, who absorbed blame so the department didn't implode. And all this time, I thought that made me valued. No, it made me convenient. I want fairness, I said finally, whatever that looks like. He nodded like he'd expected that answer. You'll have it. But understand, this situation is bigger than you. Yesterday wasn't an isolated moment. It was a symptom. A chill ran through me. Of what? He leaned back, exhaled, and said, Your boss has been playing a very dangerous game, and he thought you were too loyal, or too quiet, to ever become part of the consequence. I didn't know it yet, but that decision he made yesterday, it would cost him everything. And for the first time since walking out of that office, I felt something close to power shift. Not fully, not triumphantly, but enough to make me sit a little straighter. That night, I stopped being the guy who took it. I stopped being the silent employee who swallowed disrespect and showed up early anyway. Something had changed, and it wasn't temporary. They thought I was gone. I wasn't. Walking out of Russell Hale's office felt nothing like walking out of my boss's the day before. When I left my boss's office, I felt erased. When I left Russell's, I felt seen. Not rescued. I didn't want rescuing, but recognized. Like someone had finally turned their head toward the noise I'd been quietly drowning in for years. Still, I didn't let myself get ahead. Companies don't survive by being sentimental. They protect their own interests. If I was useful to their interests right now, fine. But I wasn't naive enough to think this was a guaranteed victory. Not yet. That afternoon, something strange happened. My phone lit up with a text from Emma, the co-worker who mouthed, "What happened?" when I walked out. Emma, are you okay? Heard you're gone? I stared at the message for a few seconds before replying. Me. Still figuring that out. What did you hear? Her answer came fast. Emma, he told the team you resigned. Said you couldn't handle the pressure. My jaw clenched so hard it hurt. Resigned. Couldn't handle the pressure. The same man who once emailed me at 2 a.m. asking if I could fix something ASAP because he'd promised the client it would be done by sunrise now framed me as the fragile one. I typed. Deleted. Typed again. Me. Makes sense. Take care of yourself, okay? She didn't ask for details. Maybe she didn't want them. Maybe she had her own lines she wasn't ready to cross. I didn't judge her for it. That evening, my inbox pinged with an email from Russell's assistant. Subject: Meeting tomorrow. Internal review. 9 a.m. Conference Room 4B. Please attend. No preparation necessary. No preparation necessary. That phrase stuck with me. It meant whatever came next was already set in motion, but I didn't know it yet. This wasn't just a meeting. It was the match strike. The next morning, I walked into the building with the kind of steady numbness you get before a medical procedure, aware but slightly detached. People glanced at me like I was a ghost who hadn't realized he was dead. Conference room 4B was already half full when I arrived. HR compliance, 2 higher-ups I'd only ever seen during quarterly presentations, and then, across the table, my boss. He looked startled, eyes widening a little like someone had told him the villain survives in the movie he thought he'd finished watching. "Mark?" he said, half smirking, half confused. "You don't work here anymore." "Sit down," Russell said from the head of the table. My boss froze mid-turn. I took a seat, not next to him, across from him, far enough that whatever he tried wouldn't land where it used to. Russell didn't waste time. We are here to address several concerns about the management practices in this department. Management practices. That was the polite phrase. I wondered how long they'd practiced saying it without rolling their eyes. My boss laughed lightly, like this was a misunderstanding. Russell, with respect. No, Russell said, calm, quiet, firm. Let's not start with the word respect. You use it too casually. My boss blinked. The room stilled. HR began reading from a document. Timestamps, complaints, inconsistencies, undocumented decisions, unusual turnover patterns. A list of names, situations, patterns of behavior. Things I had suspected but never fully seen. He kept opening his mouth to interrupt, but each time someone else spoke. Compliance. We need to discuss expense reports submitted under your login. HR. This departure pattern correlates directly with your hiring period. Russell. And yesterday you terminated an employee without documentation. My boss tried to recover. It wasn't termination. He quit. One of the HR reps looked at me. Mark, could you clarify? I didn't quit, I said simply. I was told, no termination papers needed, just go away. The room shifted. A single sentence, but it landed like a brick. My boss's face changed. Not embarrassed, not apologetic. Angry. He wasn't used to being contradicted in public. Mark is upset. He misunderstood. I heard it myself, Russell cut in. Everyone went silent. My boss looked at him stunned. You were there? Yes, Russell said. In the hallway. You didn't see me because you rarely look up when you talk down to people. His mouth opened, but no sound came out. And that, Russell continued, is the problem. A slow, electric feeling moved through me. Not triumph, not revenge. Something cleaner. He tried to pivot. It was a stressful morning. No, Russell said again. This is not one morning. This is years of patterns. A folder slid across the table. His folder, not mine. HR opened it. For the record, several members of your team have expressed concerns but feared retaliation. My boss scoffed. So now anyone can make up a story and I get dragged in front of a committee? Not anyone, Russell said. Everyone. My boss swallowed, hard. Then Russell folded his hands and delivered the sentence I will never forget. Effective immediately, you are suspended pending further review. Suspended? He hadn't expected that. He genuinely thought this meeting would be a slap on the wrist, a formality. But this wasn't discipline. This was removal. For the first time since I'd known him, he looked small. He stood up abruptly. This is ridiculous. You're all overreacting, and you... He pointed at me. You're just bitter because you got let go. I met his eyes for the first time without flinching. I didn't get let go. You got loud. The room went still. Something shifted in his expression. Recognition. Not that he'd been caught, but that the dynamic had changed forever. I wasn't under him anymore. I wasn't his shield or sponge or silent worker in the corner. I was something else now. I didn't know it yet, but this wasn't the end. It was the fall before the crash, and the crash was coming. They thought I had nothing left. They were wrong. I didn't go back to the office right away after the suspension meeting. I didn't need to. There was nothing left for me to clean up, no loose ends to tie, no quiet responsibilities waiting on my desk like abandoned pets. For the first time in years, my work didn't follow me home like an extra shadow. The company reached out the next morning, HR requesting a written account, compliance asking for details about certain reports, Russell's assistant scheduling a follow-up. It felt strange being the center of a storm I didn't start, but had lived inside long enough to know its temperature. 3 days passed before the next meeting. 3 days of quiet. I cooked actual meals instead of microwaving something at midnight. I walked without checking my phone. I slept, deeply, like my mind finally trusted me enough to rest. On the 4th day, they called me in. When I arrived, the building felt different, lighter, as if someone had cracked a window in a house that hadn't been aired out in years. People didn't look at me like I was a rumor anymore. They looked at me like I was now part of something they'd silently hoped would happen, but never believed would. Russell was waiting in his office. "Come in, Mark." There was no folder on the desk this time, no notes, just him. "We finished the review," he said. "Your former manager won't be returning." He paused for exactly one heartbeat. "He's terminated, effective immediately." That moment wasn't a punch of triumph. It wasn't fireworks. It was quiet. The kind of quiet that settles after something heavy is finally set down. I didn't smile. I didn't gloat. I just let it land. Russell continued. "We also reviewed the department structure. Your contributions came up repeatedly." I sat straighter, not out of pride, but out of clarity. "We want you back," he said, "but not in your old role." He slid a document across the desk, not the thick kind with fine print and legal traps. A simple offer, concise, direct, a new position. Higher level, authority, trust, a voice, a choice. "Before you decide," he added, "you should know something. You weren't the only one he pushed out over the years, but you were the first person who didn't disappear quietly." I exhaled slowly, feeling something uncoil inside me. "I didn't plan any of this," I said. "I know," he replied. "That's why it worked." I read through the offer. It was solid, more than solid. But it wasn't the salary bump or the title that stood out. It was the line describing what the role was, restructuring the department he had once controlled. A strange, unexpectedly steady thought passed through me. I could fix this place, not alone, not as a martyr or workhorse or silent fixer, but as someone with say, with boundaries, with an actual seat at the table instead of a folding chair in the corner. I signed. When I walked out, people noticed, not in a dramatic way, none of that slow-motion applause fantasy. Just nods, a few quiet smiles, a coworker patting my shoulder once, firmly, like he'd been waiting to do it for years. I didn't see my former boss pack up his things. I didn't want to. That part of the story wasn't mine anymore, but I did hear something. As I passed by the row of offices, the one that used to be his door was open. Empty shelves, cleared surfaces, a bare desk, the indent where his chair had been. No framed certificates, no crooked plaques, no sound except the soft hum of the ventilation system. And then there was silence, the kind that feels like justice. When I reached my new office, smaller than his old one, bigger than I needed, I placed my bag on the chair and stood for a moment, looking out at the floor I'd once walked through like a ghost. This time, no one avoided my eyes. The first email I received in my new role was from Emma. Subject, "Glad you're back. Oh, no one deserved that job more than you." I answered with 2 words that felt right and nothing more. "Thank you." By the end of the week, the department started shifting. Delegations changed. Old patterns broke. People spoke more freely. Meetings stopped feeling like interrogations and more like work. Actual work, the kind people weren't afraid to be proud of. I didn't become a hero. I didn't become a tyrant. I became something in between. A person who finally chose the life he wanted instead of the one he tolerated. My former boss tried emailing me a week later through his personal account. A long message, part insult, part plea, part self-defense. I read the first 3 sentences, closed the email, and archived it without replying. That was the real ending, not the firing, not the suspension, not the offer. The moment I stopped carrying his voice around in my head like an overdue invoice. My job didn't define me anymore, I defined it. And for the first time in a long time, I walked into work not like someone bracing for impact, but like a man who had built a place he could stand in without shrinking. A quiet life isn't dull when it fits you. This one fit.